Here's a shocking truth. Food shortages don't always make headlines. Instead, they're often handled quietly, behind closed doors. Governments and corporations are already taking steps to stretch supplies, tweak packaging, and manage stock levels, all to avoid public alarm. At first glance, store shelves may seem fully stocked, but the reality is different. Many everyday items are vanishing faster than they're being replenished, and subtle changes are being made to keep consumers unaware. In this video, we're uncovering the truth about 8 common foods that are slowly being pulled from the spotlight. These items are quietly disappearing, and by the time most people notice, it might already be too late. Stay tuned to find out what's really happening behind the scenes and how it could impact you. 1. The disappearing peanut butter supply. Peanut butter, a staple in many households, is quietly becoming harder to find, though most shoppers wouldn't notice at first glance. Grocery store shelves still appear stocked, and the familiar jars with unchanged labels sit in their usual spots. Prices may creep up slightly, but nothing seems out of the ordinary. However, behind the scenes, a different story is unfolding. Major peanut processors in the United States have been scaling back their shipments for months. Instead of flooding the market, they're holding back inventory in private warehouses, waiting for prices to rise. This tactic, often referred to as controlled scarcity, allows companies to maximize profits without triggering public alarm. By limiting restocks and rerouting bulk supplies to institutional buyers who pay higher rates, they create a subtle form of rationing that most consumers don't even realize is happening. The peanut butter shortage isn't just about corporate strategy, it's also tied to agricultural challenges. Droughts and crop diseases have significantly reduced peanut yields in key southern states. Despite these setbacks, export numbers have remained steady, meaning less of the domestic supply is available for U.S. consumers. Companies rarely disclose these details, instead attributing any disruptions to vague market conditions or operational adjustments. Meanwhile, containers of peanut products sit in ports or long-term storage facilities, waiting for the right market conditions to release them. This calculated approach ensures that grocery stores carry just enough peanut butter to maintain the illusion of normalcy, but not enough to meet sustained demand. This strategy isn't unique to peanut butter. It's part of a broader trend in the food industry, where companies have learned that open shortages lead to panic, but controlled scarcity drives profits. By adjusting packaging sizes, limiting restocks, and quietly redirecting supplies, they keep consumers in the dark. Peanut butter is just one example of how essential foods are being managed out of reach, leaving shoppers unaware of the growing gap between supply and demand. 2. Coffee beans. A brewing crisis. Coffee, the lifeblood of millions of morning routines, is slowly becoming a hidden commodity. There are no breaking news stories or official announcements about a coffee shortage, but global supply data paints a concerning picture. The world's largest coffee producers are grappling with significant challenges, and the effects are quietly trickling down to consumers. Brazil, which accounts for roughly a third of the world's coffee production, has faced devastating heat waves and droughts that have severely impacted its Arabica crop. Similarly, Vietnam, the leading supplier of Robusta beans used in instant coffee and budget blends, is dealing with its own weather-related setbacks. These environmental issues have led to smaller harvests at a time when global demand for coffee is at an all-time high. Exporters are responding by prioritizing long-term contracts with major corporations. These companies buy massive quantities of coffee in advance and store it in private facilities, leaving less available for open market trade. As a result, retail chains receive smaller allocations, which explains why certain blends or bag sizes seem to disappear without warning. Supermarkets have adapted by filling shelves with cheaper or unfamiliar brands, creating the illusion that everything is normal. However, the reality is that high-quality beans are being held back, waiting for market conditions to justify higher prices. Shipping delays have only exacerbated the problem. Congestion at major ports has slowed deliveries from Latin America and Asia, forcing warehouses to ration what little stock does arrive. To stretch limited supplies, coffee roasters are quietly reformulating their product. Premium blends now often contain a higher percentage of lower-grade beans, though the packaging remains unchanged. This is why some coffees taste slightly different or go out of stock for weeks at a time. The public remains largely unaware of these behind-the-scenes maneuvers. Industry insiders admit that these adjustments are deliberate, a way to manage shortages without admitting they exist. Coffee's slow disappearance from full public access is not just about environmental challenges, it's also about strategic timing, storage, and control. The shelves may look full, but the reality is that the coffee market is becoming increasingly restricted. 3. The vanishing canned tomato. Canned tomatoes, a pantry essential for countless recipes, are quietly becoming one of the most controlled products in the grocery supply chain. At first glance, the shelves still appear stocked, but a closer look at production numbers reveals a different story. California, which produces the majority of the world's processed tomatoes, has been hit hard by extreme droughts and rising irrigation costs. Farmers are planting fewer crops because water allocations continue to shrink, leading to reduced yields. As a result, large processors are producing fewer cans each season. However, they're not making this public knowledge. Instead, distributors are spreading out shipments to make store supplies appear consistent. European producers are facing similar challenges. Countries like Italy and Spain, known for their high-quality tomatoes, are redirecting exports to private contracts with global food corporations. These long-term deals lock in massive quantities for use in sauces, soups, and frozen meals, leaving fewer tomatoes available for direct sale in cans. Supermarkets often mask these gaps by stocking shelves with cheaper imports or rebranded versions of the same product. This creates the illusion of variety, but the reality is that premium stock is quietly disappearing into industrial storage. Transportation costs are another factor driving this concealment. With global fuel prices remaining unstable, moving canned goods over long distances has become increasingly expensive. To manage these challenges, companies are storing products closer to ports or warehouses and releasing them in small batches. This creates an artificial rhythm of supply, not too much, not too little, designed to keep prices high and prevent public panic. Retailers also use smaller packaging sizes or limited-time offers to disguise the reduced inventory. Meanwhile, processors are diluting tomato paste or using lower-grade tomatoes in blends to stretch what's left. Consumers may notice a change in taste, but labels still claim to use the original recipe. Behind the scenes, these adjustments are a quiet way to manage scarcity without drawing attention. Canned tomatoes are a prime example of how the food industry hides shortages. By controlling distribution and altering production methods, companies maintain the appearance of stability, while the market becomes increasingly restricted. 4. Baby formula, a fragile supply chain. Baby formula, a critical product for many families, has become one of the clearest examples of how essential foods can be hidden from the public. While official reports claim that production has stabilized since the major shortages of recent years, the reality is far more complex. Manufacturing plants are operating below full capacity due to strict safety regulations and rising operational costs. When a facility temporarily shuts down for maintenance or inspection, the resulting production gaps quietly ripple across the market. Instead of announcing shortages, distributors stretch out deliveries and reduce shipments to create the illusion of consistent supply. Retailers have adopted quiet rationing policies to manage these challenges. Some stores limit how much formula customers can purchase at once, but they rarely explain why. Extra inventory is often stored off-site and released in small amounts only when shelves start to look empty. This approach prevents panic buying but conceals the true scale of the problem. Imports were initially expected to fill the gap, but most international suppliers now prioritize contracts with the highest bidders. Developing regions, where governments are building national food reserves, have become major competitors for formula supply. This leaves less available for retail markets in North America and Europe. At the same time, smaller formula brands have nearly disappeared due to industry consolidation. A handful of large corporations now control most of the market, focusing on bulk contracts with hospitals and government programs. These contracts guarantee consistent orders, but leave regular consumers with limited option. The public perception is that baby formula is back to normal, but this is an illusion. Production remains vulnerable, and distribution is shaped by quiet rationing, export redirection, and corporate control. On paper, there's no shortage. In practice, parents in some regions still face empty shelves, while massive reserves sit locked away in warehouses. This controlled scarcity keeps the system steady until it doesn't. Baby formula is a stark reminder of how essential products can be quietly managed out of reach, leaving families to navigate a fragile and heavily controlled supply chain. 5. The quiet disappearance of real honey. Honey, often considered a natural and wholesome sweetener, has become one of the most manipulated food products on the market. While jars of honey still line grocery store shelves, the reality is that genuine, unadulterated honey is becoming increasingly rare. Beekeepers across North America and Europe have been raising alarms for years about declining honey production. The culprits, a combination of extreme weather, pesticide exposure, and the spread of parasitic mites that have devastated bee populations. In some areas, entire colonies have collapsed, slashing honey output by as much as 30–40%. Despite these challenges, global demand for honey continues to rise, particularly from large food manufacturers that use it as a natural sweetener in processed goods. To meet this demand without causing public concern, the industry has turned to blending. Many brands now mix real honey with cheaper alternatives like rice or corn syrups. These blends are often sold under the same labels, making it nearly impossible for consumers to tell the difference. Testing has revealed that some products labeled as honey contain only a small fraction of the real thing. Imports have further complicated the situation. A significant portion of honey now comes from countries like China, where quality standards are less stringent. Some of this imported honey is so heavily filtered that all traces of pollen, the primary indicator of origin, are removed. This makes it nearly impossible to trace the source of the honey, allowing mislabeled or diluted products to pass inspection and enter the market. Investigations have even uncovered cases of counterfeit honey being smuggled into the market through secondary ports, often mixed with legitimate stock to avoid detection. Meanwhile, small-scale beekeepers who produce authentic, local honey are struggling to compete. Their products are more expensive to harvest and produce, yet they face competition from industrially blended alternatives that are far cheaper. Many have been forced to abandon retail sales altogether, opting instead to sell directly to consumers to stay afloat. The result is a market where genuine honey is increasingly reserved for premium buyers, specialty exporters, and long-term storage. What remains for the average consumer is often a diluted or redefined version of honey. While the shelves may appear full, the jars no longer hold what most people believe they're buying. Honey's quiet disappearance is a stark example of how food shortages can exist in plain sight, hidden behind clever marketing and strategic blending. 6. Olive oil, a hidden luxury. Olive oil, a kitchen staple for millions, is quietly becoming one of the most manipulated and limited food products on the market. The Mediterranean region, which produces the majority of the world's olive oil, has been grappling with severe challenges. Countries like Spain, Italy, and Greece have experienced back-to-back seasons of record-breaking heat and drought, devastating olive crops. In some areas, yields have dropped by as much as 50%, and many farmers have been forced to abandon their groves due to skyrocketing irrigation costs. At the same time, rising energy prices and inflation across Europe have driven production and transportation costs to unprecedented levels. Rather than openly acknowledging the shortfall, many distributors have opted to quietly control supply. Shipments are being spaced out to stretch inventories, and large portions of the remaining stock are being diverted to private buyers before they ever reach supermarket shelves. This strategy ensures that stores appear fully stocked, but the number of bottles on display is often much lower than in previous years. Blending has also become a widespread practice in the olive oil industry. Investigations in several countries have revealed that bottles labeled as extra virgin often contain a mix of lower-grade olive oil or even cheaper seed oils. These blends are legally sold under loopholes in labeling regulations, allowing companies to maintain the appearance of quality while cutting costs. Consumers may notice subtle changes in taste or color, but the labels remain unchanged, masking the decline in quality. Export restrictions have further tightened the market. Some olive oil-producing nations have begun limiting shipments to protect their domestic supplies, while major food manufacturers and restaurant chains are stockpiling olive oil in bulk. These contracts secure large quantities at fixed prices, leaving less for retail consumers. The result is a carefully managed scarcity. By slowing distribution, blending products, and quietly controlling exports, companies maintain the illusion of normal supply while actual availability declines. Olive oil is still on the shelves, but the pure, high-quality product that consumers expect is increasingly becoming a luxury item hidden in plain sight. 7. The shrinking world of canned soup. Canned soup, a longtime pantry staple, is quietly becoming another food product that's being managed behind the scenes. For decades, it has been one of the most reliable and accessible items in grocery stores. However, recent industry reports reveal a steady decline in production across major brands. Rising costs for energy and raw materials have made manufacturing and shipping each can significantly more expensive. One of the biggest challenges facing the canned soup industry is the ongoing aluminum shortage. Aluminum is a critical material for soup cans, and its scarcity has forced producers to cut back on production. Many companies have reduced their product lines, focusing only on high-demand flavors to save costs. This strategy keeps profits steady, but gradually reduces the variety available to consumers. Rather than admitting to supply issues, companies have adopted subtle tactics to manage the situation. Shelves still appear stocked, but stores now receive fewer shipments each week. Distributors spread products thin, filling gaps with duplicate labels or smaller can sizes that cost the same as larger ones did previously. These changes create the illusion of normalcy while total output quietly declines. Ingredient shortages have also played a significant role. Vegetable crops like carrots, onions, and tomatoes have been hit hard by extreme weather, driving up the cost of dehydrated ingredients used in soups. Meat-based soups face similar challenges, as high feed costs and labor shortages continue to impact beef and chicken production. Combined with transportation delays and warehouse consolidations, every step in the supply chain has become slower and more expensive. Large food corporations are prioritizing bulk contracts with institutions like hospitals, schools, and catering services. These contracts guarantee consistent orders but leave less product available for retail consumers. To maintain appearances, companies rotate limited batches through stores, making it seem like the same products are always in stock. Canned soup remains available, but in smaller quantities, fewer varieties, and with increasing reliance on cheaper ingredients. It's another example of how companies manage scarcity quietly, reshaping what the public sees just enough to believe everything is still normal. 8. Powdered milk. A silent squeeze. Powdered milk, a versatile and shelf-stable dairy product, has become a quiet centerpiece in the growing trend of food control. While it remains a common sight in grocery stores, the reality is that its availability is being carefully managed behind the scenes. Global dairy markets have been under pressure due to a combination of declining milk production, government stockpiling, and corporate consolidation. In countries like New Zealand and the Netherlands, drought and rising production costs have forced farmers to reduce herd sizes. This has led to a significant drop in raw milk supplies, which are essential for producing powdered milk. At the same time, demand for powdered milk has surged. International aid programs, military suppliers, and private companies are purchasing large quantities for long-term storage. Once these bulk orders are fulfilled, little remains for retail markets. Supermarkets continue to display limited quantities to maintain the illusion of stability, but the reality is far more precarious. Corporate consolidation has further reshaped the supply chain. Many smaller dairy companies have been absorbed by larger corporations, which prioritize more profitable products like protein drinks and nutritional supplements. This shift has left traditional powdered milk production lagging behind demand. Distributors are now spacing out shipments and rationing deliveries to retailers. Shelves are replenished slowly and irregularly, creating a controlled rhythm of supply. Prices have begun to rise, but not dramatically enough to cause widespread alarm. However, these price increases mask deeper issues, such as a lack of raw materials and the high costs of production. The process of drying milk into powder is energy-intensive, requiring expensive equipment and significant amounts of electricity. With fuel and energy prices continuing to climb, the cost of producing powdered milk has become a major challenge. Farmers are also struggling with poor feed harvests and high fertilizer costs, making it difficult to rebuild supply. Powdered milk is still available, but in smaller packages, fewer brands, and at steadily higher prices. It's being managed carefully to stretch limited resources as far as possible without attracting public attention. This quiet squeeze is yet another example of how food shortages can exist in plain sight, hidden behind strategic distribution and subtle price adjustment. Bonus point 9. The hidden shortage of rice. Rice, a dietary staple for billions worldwide, is quietly becoming a victim of controlled scarcity. While it may seem like an abundant and reliable food source, the reality is that global rice supplies are under significant strain. Climate change has played a major role, with erratic weather patterns disrupting harvests in key producing countries like India, Thailand, and Vietnam. Floods, droughts, and extreme heat have all contributed to lower yields, leaving less rice available for export. At the same time, rising global demand has put additional pressure on the supply chain. Countries that traditionally export large quantities of rice are now holding back stock to ensure their own food security. India, for example, has implemented export restrictions on certain types of rice to stabilize domestic prices and prevent shortages at home. These restrictions have sent shockwaves through the global market, driving up prices and leaving importing nations scrambling to secure supplies. Retailers have responded by quietly adjusting their strategies. Shelves may still appear stocked, but the variety of rice available has diminished. Premium brands and specialty varieties like basmati or jasmine rice are becoming harder to find, replaced by cheaper, lower-quality alternatives. Packaging sizes have also shrunk, with smaller bags being sold at the same price as larger ones used to be. Behind the scenes, large food corporations and institutional buyers are stockpiling rice in bulk, locking in contracts before prices rise further. This leaves less rice available for everyday consumers, who are often unaware of the growing scarcity. The illusion of abundance is carefully maintained, but the reality is that rice is becoming a more tightly controlled commodity. Rice's quiet disappearance from full public access is a stark reminder of how essential foods can be managed out of reach. By the time the public notices the shortage, it may already be too late to avoid the consequences. Bonus point 10. The silent decline of fresh fish. Fresh fish, once a symbol of abundance and health, is quietly becoming a luxury item. Overfishing, pollution, and climate change have all taken a toll on global fish stocks, leading to a steady decline in availability. Popular species like salmon, tuna, and cod are particularly affected, with some populations nearing critical levels. To address these challenges, governments and fisheries have implemented quotas and restrictions to prevent overfishing. While these measures are necessary for long-term sustainability, they have also led to reduced supplies in the short term. Instead of openly acknowledging the decline, the seafood industry has adopted subtle tactics to manage the situation. Supermarkets and fish markets now offer a smaller selection of fresh fish, often supplemented by farmed alternatives. While farmed fish can help meet demand, it is not without its own challenges. Farmed fish often lack the flavor and nutritional value of their wild counterparts, and concerns about antibiotics and overcrowding in fish farms have raised questions about their quality. At the same time, rising fuel costs and supply chain disruptions have made it more expensive to transport fresh fish from coastal regions to inland markets. To cut costs, some distributors are freezing fish and selling it as fresh after thawing. This practice allows them to extend the shelf life of their products, but it also means that consumers are often paying premium prices for fish that is not truly fresh. The illusion of abundance is maintained through clever marketing and strategic distribution, but the reality is that fresh fish is becoming increasingly scarce. High-end restaurants and specialty markets are now the primary buyers of premium fish, leaving everyday consumers with fewer options and higher prices. Fresh fish quiet decline is a sobering example of how even the most abundant natural resources can be managed into scarcity. As with other essential foods, the public remains largely unaware of the growing gap between supply and demand until the effects become impossible to ignore.